I can do the job of 5 people by myself,
Right.
one person.
Right.
And that means, you know, you slash the cost of making television, and on top of it, you give people a really more intimate sense of what's happening in the story, as opposed to me standing here and telling you what's happening behind me. I let the characters there, and that's critical. Character. Find out who the characters are. Let them tell you the story on both sides.
Right.
But so I don't have to tell the story. I want, people want to hear what they say.
Welcome to Media in the Mix, the only podcast produced and hosted by the School of Communication at American University. Join us as we create a safe space to explore topics and communication at the intersection of social justice, tech, innovation, and pop culture. Welcome back to Media in the Mix. I'm your host, Grace Ibrahim, and today our guest needs no introduction. We are joined by Bill Gentile, accomplished journalist, documentary filmmaker, SOC professor, whose career spans 4 decades and 5 continents. Author, mentor. Your name has come up so many times for other guests that we've had on Media in the Mix. So I am so honored to have you on the podcast today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. It's an honor for me to be here as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to get right into it. So let's talk about your career journey. How did you kind of end up? I know it's a very open-ended question, but how did you end up where you are? And can you kind of give us like a little backstory into where you started, how you got to SOC, and just kind of the journey there?
Sure. I think that the seed of my interest and longing for work like as a foreign correspondent, particularly a visual foreign correspondent, a photojournalist, I think that happened during the Vietnam War when my family received copies of Life magazine every week, and from there, I'm talking about a place that's just on the periphery of Pittsburgh. It's from there that I learned about, oh my God, people can actually go and cover things like this and make pictures of the conflict that was going on. I've never been to Vietnam. I've always wanted to go, and I narrowly missed going there because the draft just didn't take me because of the high number that I got. I think it was in the 300s, so I wasn't going to be drafted. But that's where it all kind of started. And I figure out along the road, I'm the son of Italian immigrants. Okay, my parents were both born in Italy. I was born in the United States in southwestern Pennsylvania. My family and their relatives came to Pittsburgh and the outskirts of Pittsburgh in the 1930s, and they came there because at the time, Pittsburgh was the steel capital of the world. Okay, this was during the 1930s. Things were pretty rough in Italy, and people needed work. They came to the United States, and my grandfather worked in the steel mills. My father worked in the steel mills. My 3 brothers worked in the steel mills. I worked in the steel mills, temporarily to get through college. So, and it took me a very, very short period of time that I did not want to work in the steel mills for the rest of my life. Okay,
yeah.
So, I went I got a degree at Penn State University. Took a job in North Carolina, didn't like it very much, went to California. The long story short, I figured out that I wanted to be what I saw in the pages of Life magazine years before when I was probably 13, 14 years old. Then I was, in my early 20s, and I figured out that I want to be a journalist. I started as a print journalist, actually, and I studied at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and I accepted a 10-week internship to go to Mexico City and to work on an English language newspaper. I had some structural understanding of the language of Spanish, so it was a good fit for me. I was supposed to be there for 10 weeks, go back home, write up a research paper, go out, get my degree, go out, look for a job. Right?
Yeah.
But I liked what I was doing there so much that I stayed at the newspaper for a year.
That's awesome.
And after that year, I started to freelance for United Press International, one of these enormously powerful at that time wire services that had bureaus all over the world. So I was one of the guys who worked in the Mexico City bureau. And we covered more than just Mexico. Mexico City for journalists back then, and even now, is a hub. We call it a hub for journalists covering the region. So our area of coverage was not just all of Mexico, but Central America, and the Caribbean.
Wow.
Which included, Haiti, Cuba, and all the rest of it. We covered all of those countries because, they were all linked together by languages, by economy, by politics, there were so many commonalities between them.
Right.
We could not cover those countries. So I stayed at UPI in Mexico for 3 years. During those 3 years, I covered the Sandinista Revolution in Nicaragua in 1979.
Wow.
And that was a big break for me.
Yeah.
Previous to that, I was stuck in the bureau in Mexico City, and I would help cover Mexico and the region. And covering the region involved taking the copy, the stories that our stringers or our correspondents in the region put together, taking those, translating them from Spanish to English,
Right.
and sending them the material to New York so that they could be revised one more time, and then they would send those stories or not and pictures to clients around the world. Okay, so it was during the war in Nicaragua where I started out covering the war as a print correspondent. But as they sent in more seasoned professionals than I was, I moved over to the photo side. I've always accompanied all of my work as a print correspondent with pictures, because all studies show that stories accompanied by visuals are going to get more eyes on them than stories just without visuals. A lot of folks found it difficult to adapt to that new technology, technology that was coming out. I know still photographers who just could not make the transition
Right.
from making powerful pictures, and powerful pictures are they're the engine inside photography, photojournalism. They couldn't transit from that technology to a different technology, i.e., to make video as opposed to just still pictures. Right. And for me, when the opportunity came around to make movies, I jumped on it because I realized that the opportunity to create, the creative possibilities just exploded. Yeah. All of a sudden, I can make color pictures that I did for Newsweek magazine. I worked for them for about 10 years, most of them spent in Central America, covering mostly Nicaragua and El Salvador. Although my territory was all of Latin America and the Caribbean, I spent most of my time in Central America because that was the eyes of the storm. So by the time that these things came, those little digital cameras came around, and this came around, I knew how to do all this stuff. I knew how to make powerful images. I knew how to gather usable sound because I did the radio. I knew how to write a script. I knew how to interview people. I knew all of this stuff, which a lot of other correspondents simply didn't have the opportunity to acquire, or didn't have the will to go after jobs like that. I worked for the first company in this nation, in the United States, to use these little digital cameras. We had these little tape cassettes, and then we would dolly up these what were supposed to be consumer cameras. We would dolly them up, make them fix the sound system so we can get decent sound.
Yeah.
We put microphones on them, shotgun microphones and wireless microphones. To make them, kind of like semi. We call it prosumer. Okay. So we had prosumer cameras, and we broke the whole barrier between the kind of stiff person teams that worked in the field with a camera person, a sound person, a producer, then maybe even a talking head, a correspondent, and then a separate editing team. We broke that barrier and came back with material that was so much more immediate and so much more intimate, because we had one or maximum two people out there working together, or one person working by himself or herself that could do all of those things. So this company, Video News International, which was based in Philadelphia, hired me. I was one of about 100 people that the New York Times company was paying to get this organization running, VNI. About 4 of us went on to do, to really practice the craft the way that company taught us to practice the craft. We took a 3-week class in Philadelphia. They put us up in a decent hotel, and 9 to 5. They drilled this methodology into us, and it works. And it's from there that I came out with this whole idea and this whole methodology. I called it backpack journalism. And there we are. That's what I do today. I do backpack journalism.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So much life experience. That's awesome.
I'm
honestly awesome.
super fortunate.
Yeah.
That I tell people that I was able to practice the craft in the final days of the golden age of journalism. It's different now.
Yeah.
It's different.
Which I have some questions on that actually, which we'll get into later.
Sure.
Definitely. And so I guess now that we're here, backpack journalism.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's been so many guests that we've had, alumni, current students, that have just mentioned your name and backpack journalism. So I just wanted to ask you, what it means to you to kind of be a professor and to be a mentor for these students, and just to kind of give back a little bit.
I still practice the craft as much as I can, time permitting, because everything now is an issue, with time.
Yeah.
And how much I have extra time to devote to creating things. When you're a professor, you teach a couple of classes or a few classes every semester.
Yeah.
But you also are expected to do what I think is a significant amount of service to the institution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't call it I'm saddled to that. I have the privilege of being here, and doing what I do.
Yeah.
And this university allows me to do things that are important to me now in this part of my life.
Yeah.
After spending so long in the field with the intention of telling people's stories that perhaps would have an impact in their lives, in a way of resolving problems and so forth.
Yeah.
I find that same gratification here to advise young people like yourself how to follow in my footsteps, not necessarily covering conflict, because I cover a lot of conflict and I would never, encourage people to do that, because I know it can get pretty messy. Journalism is not just a job for me. Journalism, I think, is a calling, really. And those of us who have been privileged enough to practice the craft take a great deal of pride and gratification in that. So that's where I am now. I try to stay in the field, but probably more importantly, I'm free. I have the background. I have the friends, the contacts that I can call and say, hey, can we Zoom you into my class next week?
Yeah. That's awesome.
So I was doing that on when I was driving to this interview.
Yeah.
On the phone with a guy in New York who just Bob Nicholsberg, who just came out with a book about El Salvador during the 1980s. I have the opportunity to bring him into my class. I guess it's on the 8th of October. Another component of what I'm doing here is, a couple of years ago, I donated the use of my archives, which had been, I've been carrying these things around. I'm talking about 70,000 black and white images, color slides, Newsweek magazines that published my pictures.
Wow.
Just all kinds of reporters' notebooks, all kinds of stuff that are now installed in the archives and special collections section of the American University's library.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I've encouraged Bob Nicholsberg to do the same thing, and his stuff is there now because he lived in El Salvador for 4 years.
Yeah.
And he's got work from all over the world because he was a contract photographer for Time magazine. I was working for Newsweek, but he's gone to Afghanistan. He's Iraq, India. He was based in India. He was based in Rio, and we have a graduate student here, Kate Brooks, who I met in Afghanistan, I think in 2005.
Wow. Okay.
And when she was on assignment for Newsweek magazine, she's a photojournalist as well.
That's very cool.
She's installing her work into the library as well. I work really hard. We have a relationship with the Pulitzer Center on crisis reporting. I'm not sure if you're aware of these guys. You are? Yep. Okay. And to me, they're doing incredible work trying to fill the void left by mainstream media, giving up on not completely, but giving up largely or significantly on foreign news reporting, because supposedly it's too expensive. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's too expensive.
Yeah.
I wonder how much CNN or whoever else, spend on their CEOs every year on their salaries. It's not too expensive for them.
Yeah.
I say the Pulitzer Center and the School of Communication have helped send students to Mexico, Guatemala, Thailand, Laos, Burma, Borneo, Colombia, El Salvador. I mean, a couple of others to do really good work and to join this brotherhood and sisterhood of foreign correspondents around the world.
Yeah.
And that's just that so to me is like super gratifying.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So, again, and this is the chapter of my life where I can do stuff like this.
Yeah.
Because I can look back on, what I've done,
yeah.
and I use this stuff in my classes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm fulfilled in pretty much in that way.
That's wonderful. And you were talking about El Salvador. I wanted to ask you a question a little broader. I found it very powerful, the review that you wrote, that you ended it with, "I never liked El Salvador. I still don't." So my question to you is, how has, if at all, your worldview kind of shifted after covering so much conflict, so much tragedy, so much heartbreak? And is there kind of a way you've personally come up with to kind of process all that trauma and just kind of keep going? And I don't know if staying optimistic is the right word, but just in a way, just to kind of keep yourself moving and moving forward.
Yeah. No, especially El Salvador has been really traumatic for me for reasons that you're familiar with, I think. I think it's a double kind of a 2-point response, and that is, I understand, and I understood early on that if I succumb to the trauma, what trauma can do to you, I would run the risk of becoming not useful anymore,
right?
Not effective anymore,
right?
And I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do that. I have friends who can't get out of where they have been for years.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
That's not what I want to do.
Right.
It gave it a much sharper edge to my analysis of what's happening with people in my own country. Right. And it made me think that we live like very few people on the planet live. I mean, we live in safety.
Yeah.
We have jobs, we have classes, our cars, we can buy gas, we can buy food, we're not wanting here. And I think that our whole society would benefit tremendously if especially the young people could spend 6 months in El Salvador.
Yeah.
Or 6 months in Guatemala, or 6 months in Nicaragua, or Ghana, or any of these places that don't have the security that we take for granted every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's frustrating sometimes for me when I come in contact with people who don't really understand that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like we also, like you said, it's just there's a lot of like overconsumption here, so a lot of the things that make us forget what it's like to.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
And up till now, we have a pretty stable governmental system up till now.
Right.
That could change.
Right.
Soon. That could change.
Yeah. And then I kind of want to go back to backpack journalism a little bit, more so the idea of it. Also, I'm going to, just a shameless plug here that we do have a Let's Talk with Bill Gentile that talks all about backpack journalism. So go watch that on our social media if you want to learn more as well. But do you see, kind of with the evolution of, you touched on this a little bit, the evolution of technology and everything, do you see new ways of storytelling emerging and kind of where we're at now?
I see the real threat of AI.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm in the process now of organizing a panel discussion on artificial intelligence, and it's going to feature a guy who I've known for a long, long time. His name is Santiago Lyon, Lyon. This is a really, really connected guy. He was a conflict photojournalist for the for Reuters and the Associated Press.
That's awesome.
Two of the main wire services in the world. and he was the vice president of photos for the Associated Press, and now he's been working for 6 years for Adobe, and he's leading a program called Content Authenticity Initiative, and it's all about how we can, creating a system so that we can embed information in pictures, in video, in documents, and tell immediately if it's for real, who made this, who do they work for, what are their objectives, and can we believe it? So he's going to come, and it should be really, really informative, because I believe, the School of Communication, what do? We produce stuff. We all create stuff. And Santiago comes from a special perspective, because we, as him, Nicholsberg, Kate Brooks, me, we've actually risked our lives to try to make the stuff that now we have in the American University Library. Santiago was a conflict photojournalist for about 10 years, I think, and he was wounded once in Sarajevo, and he does not want people going through his stuff online or wherever they see it. And using that as the basis or the foundation of some stupid meme or some silly effort, whatever. So that's where he's coming from. But we have people here who in the school who are are going to be on the panel, who really believe that AI can do really cool things, and really things that are very, very positive.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy too with the spreading of information, how quickly it happens. So even if we know it not to be true, if it's like an AI image or something that comes out, it spreads so fast that it's almost impossible to get to every single person to let them know that it's not true. So it's like it's going to reach someone with that misinformation. It's kind of a terrifying thought.
When you first see it, it's like you first see it on the front page of the New York Times.
Right.
But then when there's a correction, it's on page 14.
Yep.
Yeah. Who sees that?
Yeah. We had a conversation the other day about the fear that AI will kind of eliminate the skills that we've kind of built. Like, I feel like when you've built your, critical thinking skills, or, if your production, kind of the idea where each phase of production, you could use AI to your advantage to kind of cut down the time, because you still understand what it takes. But if you haven't practiced those skills and you go straight to AI, it's this fear that it'll eliminate those skills and you'll never learn those skills. So that was I guess I never really thought about it that way, because we came in, my generation at least, we went through no technology, and then we had technology, and now we're like, okay, well, we've gotten really good at it, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of use it to our advantage to help us out with timelines and this. But the fear is that those skills will be completely eliminated, and then you're never really practicing those anymore.
It's like to use a similar situation with photojournalism. I started out working black and white pictures, because that's all there was. And using black, I can tell when students come to me with their portfolios and show me, I can tell which ones started in black and white and which ones didn't. They went straight to digital, because the ones that started in black and white have that's the only time you working in the darkroom is the only time that a budding photojournalist has the opportunity to work with the raw material of photojournalism, which is light. Right. So they understand composition so much more deeply than do people who picked up the thing and go, wow, look at those colors, it's fantastic. Well, doesn't make a good picture just because you have flashy colors. You have to, there's something about that composition that you're missing here, and that is that step that you go through when you work in the dark room, and you really work with the light. You can reach out and touch it and avoid it and focus it and do all the things that we do in a dark room.
And then going on to kind of like documentary filmmaking versus journalism, can you kind of describe this idea of subjective versus objective in kind of journalism, documentary filmmaking? Because I know sometimes people will use documentary filmmaking as a form of activism or call to action, or we always ask, I remember I always learned, like, what's your why when you go into documentary filmmaking? And it should be something you're passionate about. Yet in journalism, we always hear, you have to try to stay objective so you can tell two sides of the story. So can you kind of just describe that? I know it's like a fine line, but kind of the balance of having it be something you're passionate about, but also wanting to keep that objective, idea there, because
Yeah.
you don't want to get too, I guess, biased or whatever that may be.
There's a fundamental and I think very, very often forgotten difference that distinguishes print journalists from visual journalists.
Yeah.
Okay? You can work on the same story as a print journalist, and you can do your job over the phone. You can go. You can do your job if you show up 3 days late.
Right.
You can interview witnesses there. You can interview people who were affected by whatever, a flood, a war, a battle, whatever. You can read up on stuff and use that as background.
Yeah.
But the print, the visual journalists, it's a different ball game.
Right.
We have to show up in place, on time, and as close as we possibly can get.
Yeah.
Because we can't do our work over the phone. We can't do it over whatever.
Yeah.
We have to be there when the stuff is actually happening.
Right.
And that to me is the challenge, and it's the gratification.
Yeah.
What we do is a very, very physical as well as intellectual endeavor.
Right.
Because we have to figure out, a good friend of mine, a matter of fact, a guy who works for the New York Times, Tyler Hicks. I pay attention a lot to the photo credits. When I see pictures that interest me, that I find interesting, even some that I don't find interesting, I always look who made this thing.
Yeah.
And Tyler Hicks has been in Ukraine for I think since the invasion happened a couple of years ago. And he's a brilliant photojournalist. I met him in Afghanistan, I think in 2009. We were both, it was 2008, we were both embedded with the 101st, no, it was the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit. We were embedded with them.
Okay.
Along Afghanistan's border with Pakistan. And it was Tyler who told me 95% of what I do, he told me, is getting to the place so I can work.
Right.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
You have people who go, "Oh, I can make a picture like that. It's not that great."
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's not, dude. How do you get there? How do you work your way into these people's lives? How do you get the permission to go with these people? How do you know exactly when you have to go with them? How do you know when it's time to go home? When it's too dangerous? Whatever the situation is. You have to be there, and that's the big challenge.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Sure, anybody can go there and show up with one of these, make a couple of snaps, boom, 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 that's it.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I enjoy this craft. I have personal relationships with people who I made pictures of decades ago. They're part of my life. That's part of the tapestry that is my life.
Yeah.
Where is the line between promotion and journalism?
Right.
Every decision you make, I don't care how much you want to be objective, like as most print journalists will tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, you have to be objective. You can't get too close to the story. I don't think that way, and I don't think a lot of photojournalists think that way, or documentary filmmakers. You want to get as close as you can to the people and the truth.
Yeah.
And whatever that truth is, you may go into a story thinking that, X, Y, and Z, but when you show up, it's actually not X, Y, and Z at all.
Right.
It's something very, very different.
Right.
So you've got to change. The key is how close you are to the truth. That's it. You don't change anything.
Yeah.
You can go in with a preconceived notion that gets blown apart the first 20 minutes that you're there.
Right.
The truth is what we're after here.
Right.
And no matter how easy or how hard that is, and I think I get closer to that truth by knowing the characters that I make pictures of than I did when I was just strictly a print journalist.
That's why I asked that question, because
Sure.
it's good to hear from someone who's actually been on the ground and kind of been there and having to, be that close to something that might be very heartbreaking to look at or tragic or whatever it may be.
No, it's a very good question. And I get asked the same question a lot, and it's very important to have a coherent, as much as you can, response.
What is, if I know, probably hard to choose from, but if you could give us just one of your proudest moments or something that you're super proud of that you created.
Well, I brought these things here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I thought, in response to one of your questions that you sent me, this is the work of a number of years in working in this country, Nicaragua. I don't know if you've seen this, but you talk about, getting close to the truth and being objective and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I took some heat. Now, this is from the same country,
Wow.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
And these people belong on one side of that conflict, and these people
on the other side.
are on the other side of that conflict. And the heat that I took from people in my Nicaraguan family
Right.
is that one of the members, the father, as a matter of fact, he's dead, he's gone already. He says it looks like they're from the same people. They look so much the same.
Right.
And guess what? That's intentional, because they are from the same country. They are from the same people.
Right.
So that's not just an accident. That's totally intentional on my part. Same thing.
Yeah.
People on different sides of a violent conflict, and they are the same thing. So, and I got to tell you, these were really, really, really hard decisions. My first wife is Nicaraguan, and her youngest brother was badly injured, wounded in a fight with the Contras. He was a member of the Sandinista army. Danilo is his name. So for me to be, trying to find that balance between people's expectations was not easy. And here's a prime example of this. Okay, so tell me who's a Sandinista, who's a Contra. You tell me.
I couldn't.
There's no way to. If you look closely at their weapons, and if you know anything about weapons, you could say, okay, this one looks like
more advanced than the other. But no, I mean.
Yeah. So this is the point. You know what? And I'm proud of the fact that that I decided to use these pictures in the way I did, because that's exactly how this thing played out. Yeah. And I think the other piece that I'm really, really proud of, that's an accumulation of all the stories that I tell, and all the experiences that I've gone through as a journalist. It's all here. My memoir. It's 97,000 words of me talking about whatever. I'm the only knucklehead in the School of Communication who teaches a course in the School of Communication, not in English. Yeah. Okay, I teach my backpack documentary in Espanol class in Spanish. Look, when I came here in 2003 at this university, okay, everybody's skin, well, just about everybody's skin looked kind of like mine, without the freckles. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, you get what I'm driving at. Yeah. But now, because of the excellent work done by people at the School of Communication and in the university in general, this school looks more like the rest of the country. Yeah. And that's what we want. Yeah. I mean, my Spanish is pretty fluent. I read it, write it, talk it. My first wife is Nicaraguan, the second one is Cuban. Yeah. So I have to speak their language too. Absolutely. Yeah. My objective of teaching this class in Spanish is I want all these Hispanic people and Latinos, I want them to feel comfortable, and safe here. And that's the objective. But also, Spanish is the second most spoken language in the United States of America. Yep, it is. When I first started to be a journalist, it was an asset if you spoke Spanish. And particularly if you worked like in Miami, Chicago, New York, it was an asset. Now, you better speak Spanish.
It's like almost a requirement now. Yeah.
Almost a requirement. Almost a requirement. Yeah.
I feel like we have so much more to talk about. So hopefully we get a part 2.
Okay.
For this podcast.
Let me know.
It was wonderful to have you on, Bill. Thank you so much for offering your insight and your experiences, and I hope everyone learned a thing or two today. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you on the next episode. If you'd like to donate to the School of Communication, go to giving.american.edu, and we'll see you next time. That's a wrap.